Hi everybody, it's Dan and welcome back to my kitchen. Today we're going to be whipping up a Sailor Moon inspired cake with the simple chocolate cake recipe, fluffy vanilla buttercream, simple fondant decorations, and all of it's going to come together for one amazing, delicious, nerdy cake. I'll be sure to throw a link to the full recipe down below in the description, along with my tips, tricks, everything you might need to whip this up right in your own kitchen. Plus, while you're down there, don't forget to like, subscribe, click the bell to receive notifications every time I post a new video. Now for our doll cake, we are just gonna have 2 layers, but if you want to split up this doll cake form into 3 layers or 4 layers, definitely feel free to go ahead and do so. But for today, we're gonna go ahead and just use 2 layers. So before we stack them together, we're gonna add a generous helping of this dreamy vanilla buttercream, smooth it out, and add our top layer of cake. Once your cakes have been filled and stacked, it's gonna be time to start our crumb coat. Now our crumb coat is gonna be a very thin layer of frosting used to glue our crumbs down, sealing the cake's moisture, which is going to be super useful if you need to store the cake before decorating, and provide an even base for additional buttercream. It's basically a delicious primer for your cake masterpiece that keeps the cake on the cake side and the frosting on the frosting side. So for our crumb coat, we're going to use an offset spatula and spread a thin layer of frosting over our cake. It should be thin enough that you can see the cake and crumbs through it, and don't worry about any visible crumbs. Just smooth the icing as best as you can and let it dry until it crusts over or feels dry to the touch. And because we are going to be using fondant today, we want to go ahead and make sure that our cake is completely cooled. A hot cake will melt the crumb coat. And we also want to try to do one more layer of frosting over our crumb coat before draping on our fondant. This is really going to help the fondant stick to the cake. Once we have that crumb coat on our doll cake, we're going to go ahead, we're going to grab our fondant and begin to cover. So for this Sailor Jupiter cake, I am going to be using a Kelly green fondant. This way I'm really capturing those core colors of Sailor Jupiter. And what I did was just roll out my fondant and cut out about an 8-inch wide circle. Now usually, because I am using a 6-inch round doll cake form pan, I would cut out a circle that's a little bit wider, but I wanted to make sure that the fondant for our Sailor Jupiter cake was draped enough, this way we can pipe roses underneath our fondant once we are at that point. So when you're ready, just go ahead, bring your fondant over to your cake and gently lay it on top, then smooth it out while shaping it to give the bottom of your cake that kind of that dress motion, as if our Sailor Jupiter cake is going to be jumping right into action. Now when it comes to your fondant, we've used a lot on the channel before, so I'm not going to bore you too much with little clips of me rolling out the fondant. Just keep in mind that your fondant should be about 1/8 inch thick. It is susceptible to tearing and cracking, so it's important to use even pressure and not go too fast. And no worries if you don't get it perfect right away, because we had a nice thin layer of crumb coat. If you feel like it's not perfect or to your liking, just carefully remove it, re-knead your fondant, re-roll it out, and re-drape over your cake until it is just to your liking. Once you're happy with how your fondant is laying on your doll cake, we're going to move on to that next step. Grab your doll and let's get her secured right into her cake. Once we have our doll secured in our cake, let's go ahead and take our fondant and begin to work on the upper half of our doll cake. First up, we're going to take our white fondant. We're going to roll it out lengthwise and we're going to cut out 2 identical 3 to 4 inch strips and drape them on top of our doll and connect them to the bottom half of our fondant dress. And this way, our next piece of fondant will have something to stick to when we wrap it around the top of our doll. Next, we're going to roll out some white fondant, cut out a hexagon shape, and place that onto the doll's upper half. Now, you want to make sure that this piece covers her top half as well as the fondant that we placed to seal her in. Be sure to remove the excess and close the seam with your handy dandy fondant tool or just your fingertips. No need to make it absolutely perfect, since there is going to be fondant draped from the shoulders as well as a big bow down the back of the gown. With the back out of sight, we still want to work out the shape for the top half of our doll using our fondant tools and hands before we go back in adding some fondant details. We're going to move on to that next step. And that is going to be to cover our fondant with a very, very, very thin layer of piping gel. So grab your piping gel, grab your paintbrush, and let's get going on this fondant. Now, usually I would use water. It is my go-to every time I'm working with fondant and I want to stick things to fondant. But because we are going to be using edible glitter on our cake, I wanted to make sure that the edible glitter actually stuck to the cake. Because the piping gel is not going to harden and weigh down on our fondant, I thought this would be a nice way to test out to make sure that the piping gel holds the edible glitter in place when we move to that step. After that piping gel is on your fondant, grab your edible glitter, grab a paintbrush, and let's get started on getting this cake nice and sparkly. Now, when it comes to actually buying your edible glitter, be sure that you are actually looking at the labels for the type of glitter you want to use on this cake. Most edible glitters and luster dust should state edible on the label. If the label just says non-toxic or for decorative purposes only and does not include an ingredient list, the glitter should not be used directly on foods and should not be consumed at all. If the glitter you'd like to use is edible, it will likely say somewhere on its packaging edible glitter and include a list of ingredients that can commonly include sugar, cornstarch, maybe some color additives. Either way, don't be fooled by products that say non-toxic on the label. Just because it's non-toxic does not mean it's edible. For example, Play-Doh, non-toxic. You're not going to grab a chunk and eat that for breakfast. Luckily, it's pretty easy to figure out what's edible and what's purely aesthetic once you know what to look for. So always be sure to check the label and what's actually marked on the item itself. Now, I will admit, for the space-time keep fondant decorations, I would suggest following along with either this full Sailor Pluto doll cake video or by using the stock image from the Sailor Moon TV series in my blog post, which I will link down below in the description. When it comes to actually making the key fondant decorations, just simply roll out some silver fondant, a little bit of red fondant, use a cutter tool, and cut out some simple key shapes. It's really that simple, especially when you have an image that you can follow along with. So again, I know I said it just before, but definitely be sure to check out this recipe blog post down below. Once you have your 4 space-time key decorations all set and ready for your cake, find the best place that you'd like to add them. For this cake today, I'm thinking we're going to add them just right around the cake doll itself. So I'm going to find some good spots for them and just assemble them right as I'm decorating. Now, to make sure that this cake captures all things Sailor Pluto, we're going to go ahead and add our Garnet Orb decoration right on top of our cake. So let's go ahead and get that ready by rolling out some silver fondant, using a heart-shaped cookie cutter, and punch out a heart shape. Now, either with a smaller heart-shaped cookie cutter or by hand, cut out the center of your heart so that you're left with a silver fondant heart outline. Re-roll silver fondant, cut out 2 silver triangles about 1 inch tall. Then with that same silver fondant, and either with a small heart-shaped cookie cutter or by hand, cut out a small heart. This should be well sized to sit on top of the larger silver heart, and then just simply begin to assemble on the cake, starting with laying down the first small silver triangle inverted so the point is facing down. Lay the larger silver fondant heart so that the heart point lines up to the point of the bottom inverted triangle. Place the red circle fondant on top of the silver heart. Place the second silver triangle on top of the largest red circle. Next, just place 2 yellow fondant circles on both sides of the larger silver heart so that they are stacked on top of one another. Then take the smaller silver heart and place on top of the large heart so that the point meets in the center of the larger heart. And lastly, we're going to take 2 small yellow circles. We're going to place one on the top center of that small silver heart and in the bottom center of the small silver heart. Once you have your space-time keys and your Garnet Orb decorations, we're going to move up to the top of our doll cake and finish wrapping up our decorating with some standard Sailor Pluto colors. Once your cake is fully decorated, that's it. You're done. Pat yourself on the back. You've made your very own Sailor Moon inspired cake that is fit for the Moon Kingdom itself. And this is going to be a part of a huge Sailor Moon cake series. We've done Sailor Moon cakes on the channel before. I had fun. I'm such a big Moony, huge Sailor Moon fan. So I was thinking, sketching up some cake designs. I was like, you know what? Let's do maybe another 24 Sailor Moon inspired cakes. So be sure to head to those comments down below and let me know your favorite Sailor Moon scout so we can go ahead and make sure that she gets their very own cake. And that is a wrap. Thank you so much for hanging out today in my kitchen and checking out this amazing new recipe. Don't forget, if you want even more, like, subscribe, click the bell to receive notifications every time I post a new video. And if you whip this up right at home, don't forget to give a tag on Instagram. You know, let me see what you're baking up in your kitchen. Alrighty, well, I'm gonna grab a slice of this cake, enjoy the day, enjoy the weather. Hope you get to do the same. And as always, I will see you in the next video very, very soon. Bye-bye.